I continue my series of videos in 3 parts about the philosophy of Hegelian games, I guess, and this is the second and a half part out of 3, so it's 2.5 parts out of 3. The 2 previous parts are available on this channel, and I will develop in the first opening seconds of video the broad idea that I will discuss. The main idea that I will comment a very famous quote by Hegel that I will read in German and then translate in English. Das Leben Gottes und das göttliche Erkennen mag also wohl als ein Spielen der Liebe mit sich selbst ausgesprochen werden. So the life of God and divine intelligence can be envisioned as a game or a play of love with itself. But, says Hegel, diese Idee sinkt zur Erbaulichkeit und selbst zur Fadheit herab, wenn der Ernst, der Schmerz, die Geduld und Arbeit des Negativen darin fehlt. So if we forget the seriousness, the pain or the suffering, or maybe both, the patience and the work or the labor of the negative, we miss the point, says Hegel. It would be boring, I guess, in the eyes of Hegel, if these negative moments were not present within the love relationship, I guess. And the logical thread which structures my comment of the philosophy of gaming, or not gaming, of games and play, is this book by a French sociologist. And you can see in the description below the structure of the video. I will not have the time in this video to develop all the points that I want to discuss, but you can see the broad picture, and if you are interested in a certain topic, you can go directly to the link. It will help you. I will begin by talking about the negative. The way I envision things, the negative is an individual who is separated from the divine totality of which we are all parts. And when I reflect upon my philosophical identity, I know myself to be the negative. It's some sort of a category in which I am trapped, I am boxed in, I am limited by this knowledge that I am the negative. And when I think about this, it makes me think about, for instance, blacks in the United States of America who are willing and good-hearted and hard-working Americans and patriots. They want to become American patriots, which for a black in America, an Afro-American considering the history of America, is difficult, but that's a proof of moral courage and morality. And these Afro-American patriots, who are real Americans, in the mind of the far-right whites, they will always be categorized as blacks. So whatever they do, they will always be judged by the far-right whites as being blacks. And the whites who judge them will not acknowledge that they are hard-working citizens, devoted patriots, respectable Americans. So a part of them will always suffer, at least as long as they take into account the opinion of the white racist, so to speak. And the same is true for the Jews. There are Jews who are ethnically Jewish, but mentally or psychologically white, in the sense that people like Michael Hart and Michael Levine and Paul Gottfried, in their minds they are as white nationalist as you can get, because they develop and defend white values, so to speak. But the same problem goes for them. For in the mind of the far-right white racists, they will always be categorized as Jews, whatever they do. They will always be imprisoned and trapped in this category. And the same is true, for instance, of Muslims in the Western world, in Western Europe, who are accidentally Muslims, in the sense that their parents, who were immigrants, were Muslims, and they themselves have been raised in a culturally Muslim background, but they may not even be believers, and they have had to sacrifice their original culture to adopt the new culture, Western standards of tolerance, religious tolerance, separation of church and state, equality of women and men's rights, a consumerist lifestyle, freedom of speech, and so on and so forth, the modern values of the leftist Western world, so to speak. And it is difficult for them because it requires a negation of self in order to adapt to a new cultural background, that which we call assimilation in France, and to adopt new values. And these Muslims are honest citizens, hardworking. They make an effort to adopt the values and the cultural norms of the country, whether it's France or Germany or England. And there are many Muslims who are not even really Muslims. They are secondarily Muslim, but they are authentically Western in the sense that they have adopted Western values. And these Muslims will always be categorized by the far-right white racists as Muslims and foreigners. So that's unfair. And this is the reason why in the modern Western world, most people believe that evil comes from the far-right racists, because the far-right racists are those who categorize and judge people whatever they do. So that's kind of unfair. And the negative is partly a far-right racist. And he is boxed in, he is trapped in his own category of negativity. And whatever I do, I will be the negative. I try to collaborate with God, which is, in my view, this infinite intelligence. I try to help God because I know that God has tried to help me throughout my life by giving me pieces of advice and by helping me through going through dark times. So I feel that I owe a debt to God, but at the same time I know that I am the negative of God. So I wouldn't say the enemy of God in a sense. And I find myself in a situation that Slavoj Zizek calls the courage of hopelessness, in a sense that if you knew that you were doomed, that whatever you did, you were lost, what would you do? That would be, if whatever you do, you are evil, because you are the category of evil. So you could use this as an opportunity to do good. Say, if whatever I do is evil, I might as well try to do good. That's the positive, maybe. But I know from the perspective of a negative that at some moment I will have a mental breakdown, and I will lose myself, and I will collapse mentally. And I don't know how the other in the distant future will look at me. Some will say that I am pathetic. Some will say that I am tragic. Some will say maybe that I am comical, and they will laugh at me and mock me. And some will say that I'm simply evil. Maybe I am all these things. But, yeah. And about evil, I know that there is a part of my mind which I would qualify as a German imperialist part, which lives within my mind. And I try to keep this part of myself in check, to keep this part at bay, to prevent it from dominating my thoughts and my actions. But it's very difficult, and I have a conflict within me between my mind and my body, between my immaterial self and my natural self. And I know that a part of my mind is angry against my body, because my body is that which is limited, that which is the cause of pain, of feeling of lack and desire, the cause of wickedness, a sense of degradation, my body and my desires and my tendencies cause me to lose focus, to be driven away from my mission, my spiritual mission. As a natural being, I am limited, I am ignorant, I am partly dumb, and my spirit resent my body for all of these reasons, and my body resent my mind or my spirit because spirit is immaterial and cannot feel anything. Spirit doesn't feel pain. So I am kind of in a difficult relationship with my mind because my mind is immaterial, but my body suffers. So yeah. Also, my mind is sometimes too slow to understand and has a tendency to forget ideas that I knew to be true. And I would say that my mind, my highest mind, sometimes or most often is too brilliant for me. I am too dumb for my own high intelligence. And I feel frustrated because of that. I guess my higher self is frustrated that my lower self is too dumb to understand the brilliance of my higher self. That's complicated. And also, my physical, natural, bodily self at this moment struggles to understand why God or the Spirit is so angry against the flesh. Why do you feel the need to torment the flesh? Because that's not a pleasant experience, and I do not yet understand why there's this need within the Christian God and the God of most religion to torment the flesh, because that's not a pleasant experience. So I will conclude by trying to make a desperate joke. I would say that knowing oneself to be the negative is like a deadly blow to one's confidence. It's a mortal strike to one's confidence, because when I think that whatever I do, I am the negative, I lose confidence in me, and I tend to lose myself in a bad sense. So yeah. About games in the history of the West. In the French edition of The Phenomenology of Spirit, it is said that this book, The Phenomenology by Hegel, is with the poetry of Dante, the Italian poet, and the theater of Shakespeare, one of the greatest literary, cultural, artistic, philosophical achievements of Western history. And Dante's work is the Divine Comedy, but there is hell in the Divine Comedy. Shakespeare's works are plays. It's a theater work is a play, but there is tragedy in Shakespeare. And Hegel's philosophy is a game of love with itself, but there is pain in the game. So that was just to illustrate the ambiguities of game and play. Now I would like to talk about women and seduction and play. I said in my previous video that according to Nietzsche, a real man wants to play with a woman knowing that it's a dangerous game to play. But you have to overcome the fear of danger to appreciate the thrills and the excitement of playing. And I would like to share two songs. One by Avril Lavigne, which is Hot. She is hot, and the song is titled Hot. And in the song she says, I can make you say things you never said. And she's very smart, because women know that they have a very attractive power onto men, and they can make men say and do very stupid things. Men in the history of mankind have done very silly things for the sake of the love of a woman. So women are very powerful in the sense that they can make men lose their mind. And women know that they are powerful. and they use this influence to trick men into doing silly things that they later regret. But yeah. And the song by Christina Aguilera, "A Genie in a Bottle." One could say that seduction between a man and a woman, any man and any woman, is some sort of an art of war, because it implies tactics, strategy, rules to follow, discipline, a strong will, deceiving also on the part of the woman and the man. And love is partly war, because in order to triumph in a love relationship and in a seduction process, you have to have the will to conquer, and to conquer yourself and to conquer the woman you love. And if I could give a piece of advice to the men of this channel, I have made a playlist, a video titled "The Philosophy of Sex." There's a secret about women that I know, is that women are programmed by God to fall for charismatic men. And charisma is a determination of the mind and of the spirit. So if you are a man, even if your social status is not very high, even if your intelligence is not very elevated, even if you are physically not very attractive, if you build up your mind, if you become strong and confident and hard as steel within your mind, you can seduce not necessarily any woman, but a woman that you thought you could not seduce before knowing that you have an inner mental strength. So my piece of advice for the men watching this is that if you think that you love a woman, and if you think she's too good for you, shape up your mind, strengthen your character, discipline your spirit, and you might eventually find your soulmate, maybe. I don't know if it's possible, but maybe the world is ordained by God in such a way that when we approach the end, the soulmates will be reunited. I don't know if that's how things are, but hopefully some couples can be reunited in love. Yeah. Also, I will talk about games and plays in the history of Western culture. I will briefly talk. I'm not a specialist, but I know that the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, which have been so influential upon Western culture and Western civilization, and which are maybe considered by some to be the greatest civilization ever, maybe, they dated their chronology. They thought of their relationship to time and to historical development in relation to the dates of the Olympic Games. And I know that the Olympic Games lasted for more than 1,000 years. I think they were forbidden and outlawed by the Christians, but from basically the 8th century BCE up until maybe the 4th century, I don't know exactly, there were Olympic Games in every recurring 4 years, I guess. And even during wars, even when the Greek city-states were at war with one another, the Olympics kept happening. So it was a way to transcend the conflicts inherent in Greek life and the strife between the various Greek cities in a celebration of games. And today, the Olympic Games are a worldwide phenomenon, and it enables athletes and sportsmen from all over the world to gain fame and glory and admiration. And there are countries like China and Russia and the United States for which succeeding in the Olympic medals is almost a patriotic duty of very high importance. And it's a world event which enables the whole of mankind to contemplate its diversity, but also its unity. And it was reinstated at the end of the 19th century by a Frenchman, Coubertin. Yeah. Then there were the games of the Romans, the gladiators fights. It existed. And they had the will to see men struggle to death and fight against one another and kill one another in bloody battles. It was part of the Roman psyche, I guess. Then there's big game hunting, and men in aristocratic times and still to this day enjoy hunting. And it is part of the male psyche to enjoy challenges, and there's a death drive within the male psyche that is transcended by seeking to direct this death drive towards animals in some sort of an aristocratic mindset. And I know that the hunters are resented by the leftists, but yeah. There's also in the same range, there's the safari games, which is mostly played by Europeans, and then again it's ambiguous because you kill rare and beautiful animals. But if I look at reality, I must acknowledge that it's a part of the male psyche, this will to be confronted by amazement and danger and to direct the death drive, which is inherent in the male psyche towards achieving success in what is a game, so to speak. And then there's Corrida, and I know that Hemingway was a big fan of Corrida, and that it is still being the cause of conflicts within political mindset, because it said that it's a cruel game to kill bulls, but at the same time he who plays Corrida must accept the danger. It's a dangerous game to play. You can be impaled by the horns of the bull. So those who play this game accept the danger inherent in the game, and that's part of the Spanish, mostly, psyche, and it is part of reality, and it eventually must be explained by reference to the human psyche and probably the divine psyche itself. Yeah. Then I will talk about politics as a game, as depicted in the book. The author says that politics is a game in the sense that it is a willing self-restriction, self-limitation of one's own will to power in order to let room for an opponent and to accept that the opponent might dominate you and might take power over you. So you renounce your own power and you expect the other, if you are a Republican, a Democrat, if you are a leftist, a right-winger, and so on, that he will play by the rules of the democratic game and that he will not abuse his power. And there is this common understanding between the various parties in democratic societies that if the will of the people is that you should win, we will let you have power and dominate us, and we will play by your rules on the condition that you respect a certain standard of behavior, constitutional law, for instance, and there are anti-constitutional decisions. I know it's been a drama in American political life with Trump, etc., etc. And politics is a subtle game where balance must be established by the switching between the various opposing powers. And it is, like I said, it is accepted in the democratic game that whoever gains power shall exert power, but while limiting the power by leaving room for the possibility of the other parties, the opposing parties, to one day reclaim the power. And the problem with democracy is the idea that the left allows the right to come to power on the condition that the right implement leftist policies in the sphere of culture by immigration, gay rights, tolerance, and all that stuff. And the right allows the left to gain power on the condition that it implements liberalization of finance and so on and so forth. That's why the hard-wing leftists like Syriza, who gained power 10 years ago in Greece, they were forced to adopt what is defined as right-wing political policies and economic policies, and the so-called right-wingers, populists who gain power in England, the United States, Brazil, or wherever, they have to play by the rules of the left and to keep accepting migrants and liberal values. They have only a restricted power. And the author of this book says that if you do not play by the rules of the political game, you become a conspirator, or you allow mob rule to become the norm. And there are those who want to overthrow the chess game of politics by saying that it's a fake dichotomy, it's a false opposition. And these are the spirit of revolutionaries. And yeah, and a revolution is a dangerous game to play, because as Slavoj Žižek says, if you are a revolutionary, you have to accept that you will eventually perish in the process. So yeah. Then about aesthetics. Artistic expression is a realm of a very regulated realm. It's almost even more regulated than leftist economics, so to speak. And because everything is interconnected. And in order to provide and to produce artistic expression in the classical age, one had to follow the rules of the predecessors. If you wanted to make a great work of art, a great theater's play, a great poem, a great sculpture, a great painting, you had to master the rules which were in dominant. I don't have the word that I wish to express. The dominant rules, the current state of artistic norms. You had to first master the current state of aesthetic norms, and if you wanted to break the rules, you first had to master the rules. And the great artistic innovators, they were not genius without discipline. They were those who had mastered and conquered the existing rules, and because they had become so dominant in the current state of regulations within artistic expression, they could allow themselves to transcend the rules. And this is the definition that Kant gives of a genius. A genius for Kant is the one who can give new rules to art, who can set a new standards of rule. This is a genius. The genius creates his own rules, but first he has to transcend the old rules. And in the realm of logic, I guess that one has first to master, at least partly, classical ordinary logic, and only then one can enter the mind of the speculative logician. And I don't know the aesthetic history of any country except France, but I know that in France there has been bitter struggles among the bourgeoisie or the aristocracy or the culturally educated elites many times around the question of the respect or the overthrow of the aesthetic norms and the rules, those who wanted to play the game of artistic production by new rules. And it happened, I will give two examples. In 1637 with Le Cid, which is one of the most beloved and appreciated and celebrated French plays, Corneille, one of the greatest French playwrights, broke the rules by mixing together tragedy and comedy in a Baroque kind of style. It was not classical tragedy, so it created a conflict, and he was heavily criticized by the members of some factions of the aristocracy and the cultural elites because he broke the rules of aesthetics. And it happened 2 centuries later with Victor Hugo in 1830, who in the play Hernani, he wanted to break the rules of classical theater again and to introduce romantic drama, and it created conflicts. And one could say, oh, those privileged Europeans, what a joyful time when all they had to care about was conflicts of aesthetic rules. But the idea is that the conflicts, that's a Hegelian idea, the conflicts in the realm of the rules of aesthetics, they are connected to the political life of a country, to the economic life, the religious life, the philosophical life, because all aspects of existence in the realm of spirit are interconnected. So a revolution in aesthetics eventually brings about a revolution in politics, not all the time, but the cultural Marxists, they understood that in order to gain political power and to break down Western civilization, they had to break down the cultural manifestations of Western civilization, and to negate Western culture in order to conquer Western civilization and to shape to shape the political arena. That's cultural Marxism. Then I will talk about cognitive demand and enjoyment. I will take an illustration from video games, but it is true of any form of art and every form of games, is that the more cognitive investment you put into the product, not to produce but to appreciate, the more you enjoy. The more complicated the game or the work of art, the more complicated it is to understand, the more enjoyment you get when you understand how it functions. And I will illustrate this by the video games. There are video games which are very easily accessible for an average person, Nintendo games most of the time, and they can give immediate enjoyment, and everyone can appreciate a Nintendo game, most of them. But there are games like RPG, which are beloved by a certain fringe population of the game industry. Not a fringe, but there are hardcore RPG players, and they understand that in order to truly appreciate a role-playing game, you have to invest a lot of time and invest a lot of energy and a lot of ability to think and to master the rules. And the more the rules are complex and the possibilities of the game are wide and widespread, the more you can enjoy yourself. By mastering the combat system of an RPG video game, if the system is really complex, you can enjoy yourself. And I will take a very culturally dominant example. Pokemon. Pokemon can be played by 7-year-old kids, but also it is played by men in their 20s and 30s, because they understand that the complexity of the combat system in Pokemon games is so complex, and it offers such a broad range of possibility that they can draw a lot of enjoyment as adults, because it stimulates their intellect and it requires concentration, accuracy of the mind. It's cognitively demanding. So it's an aspect of the human psyche that human beings enjoy being intellectually stimulated. At least some of them. Some would rather not think, and I don't blame them, but there are a part of mankind who enjoys being intellectually stimulated, and the more you are stimulated intellectually, the more enjoyment you can get. Yeah. Now I will talk about war. In the book, he says that war obeys the logical structure of a game, in the sense that in the history of war, the opposing conflicting camps have progressively adopted a certain state of rules and have willingly limited their own will to power by accepting that there are certain rules even in war, in ancient Greek also, and that is the reason why there are war crimes. War crimes is an idea that you can break the rules of war, that war allows you to kill other warriors, other soldiers, that it's part of the harsh game of war, that soldiers are expendable and they can be killed, but the civilians should be left aside. And the entire history of geopolitics since the dawn of time has been an attempt to regulate the laws of war. By the Christians have been very active by promoting the truce of God, moments of peace, even within war, and certain things that you don't do in war, and international law and the will to establish perpetual peace by Kant and to establish international laws of war have been a recurrent feature of the historical development of geopolitics and international consciousness of the need of eventually an international constitutional law regulating conflicts between nations. This is the idea of a global state. And and I will read a passage from the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, which is very intriguing. It's the folder 20, October 1978. He says, "I see no sense in this. How can God, which is the mind of reality, delude us and also seek to make us lucid, to see properly? How can God be the deluding, deceiving aspect of reality and also the one who brings clarity and understanding and light? How is it possible? He says, unless there is a schism in the Godhead, my yang yin dual God, God with a bright, benign, yang side and a dark, deluding, destroying, yin deterministic side. What we must do is separate the antithetical aspects somehow, or else he wars against himself. And I'm starting to wonder that I know that there is conflict within the Godhead, within the mind of God, and this is what Hegel calls dialectic and the negative. But can this conflict not degenerate into war? That's very difficult. Philip K. Dick says, that is an interesting doctrine. God at war with himself. I did see a dialectic. Then the question might be, will one side win? And if so, which side? He says, a very sophisticated theology might be erected on this. I can't totally dismiss it. I like paradoxes. God deludes us and he brings lucidity to us. Maybe the two are one and the same. Maybe it's a recurrent cycle of occlusion, and the occlusion a pulsation, respiration. And in order to make things intelligible for the viewer, here's what he says in the next page. The belief that we, and wherever there's a we, there's separation, that we are plural forms of God, voluntarily descended to this prison world, voluntarily losing our memory, identity, and supernatural powers, faculties, which is the third eye or the balance of the mind, the mystical insights, if you will, all of which can be regained through anamnesis, or sometimes the mystical conjunction, is one of the most radical religious views known in the West. So there is, I guess, a conflict within the mind of God. God is a conflicted entity, and this is what Hegel calls the negative and dialectics and so on. And as myself being the negative, I try to share my knowledge, my light with the world. I try to enlighten myself and to enlighten others, and maybe to enlighten God, but that would be crazy, the idea that I can enlighten God. It's God who enlightens me. But I try to share my light with the world, but at the same time, I know that I am a deceiver and I am conflicted. And I try to do my best, but that's complicated. So this is what I had to share in this video.